lemon face, lemon face. Welcome back, everybody. Let's jump right into it. I believe our next segment here is D&D horror stories.
Yep, found some stories online that I was entertaining. I want to get your opinion on. So different people with things going terribly wrong with D&D. A lot of them are beginners, first-time people. Like this guy's talking about his first exposure to tabletop role-playing games was in high school when one of his friends was decided to introduce a small group to the concept. So he said, here's the list of the people who were in the story. He said Harry, DM of the story. He enjoys creating characters that would be frowned upon here. A lot of those guys, furries or sexualized characters. Thankfully, he doesn't force that onto any of our characters. Sean, the mostly forever DM, he is the most creative regarding lore in his characters and likes to create characters with flaws that would put the party at risk. He's aware of the risk, however, and always makes sure to minimize the problematic attitude of his character. We're all fine with this. Miles, the rules lawyer, he's the one who introduced us to TTRPGs in the first place, and as stated just above, makes sure to follow the rules. This can be a bit annoying at times, but there's no real problems usual. Then Blue, a mostly absent player. He is the one who lives the furthest away, and he doesn't often have the time to roleplay with us. He has a habit of creating edgy characters, though it's never to the point of absurdity and is often done right. And me, your average guy, I enjoy role-playing aspect more than the combat aspect, and I tend to space out a bit sometimes. When Miles first introduced us to RPGs, we followed Pathfinder's world and rules. However, we quickly adapted the first few sessions into a completely homebrew world, and after about a year or two of playing regularly, college happened, and we couldn't make it to regular sessions. The game was moved to Discord, and to this day, this is the place where we continue the story. Over the years, we tried to branch out of this world and tried our hands at different, but still homebrew worlds, and now homebrew set of rules as well. This trend is what started the world in which our horror story takes place. The setting. The story takes place in a Japanese-style medieval fantasy world. Our characters are all orphans taken in by a powerful lord of the region, raised and trained as his children. The basic plot was that the strangers from another land tried to invade our lands and attack us, and we basically had to run around and defeat groups of them as we found them. There were 5 of us, and as the rules were homebrew, we didn't really have classes and only defined our roles through our stats. But I'll do my best to choose classes closest to the characters for reading comprehension. Miles played a female fighter, Sean played a female paladin, Blue played a male druid, and I was a female cleric. I know we're a bunch of weebs. However, I said 5 characters. I present to you Harry's character and one of the problem DMPCs, the female barbarian. At first, there weren't a lot of problems. We did what we were asked to do and won some battles. We fled others, and everything went fine. One day, however, we met one of a few strangers in the forest, and they had daggers that could poison us. We fought as we could, and Miles' fighter ended up getting poisoned. As we finished the battle, we tried to loot the bodies, but we couldn't find the antidote. Bad rolls, sadly. Harry expected us to have something to combat the poison, but we didn't after the battle. Suddenly, DMPC found the group, they weren't there before, and somehow had the antidote and cured fighter before it was too late. At this point, I should mention that none of us enjoy killing other characters. It usually happens during a meaningful roleplay moment narrated by the player themselves, or with their approval during combat. We were all fine with losing characters, by the way, as long as it was reasonable. But keep in mind that Harry was the least comfortable with killing other characters, which is probably the reason why he pulled the antidote without trying to roll for it himself. Anyway, we moved on. After a few days later, we met another invader and tried to fight it. The DM described him as seeming a lot stronger than the other ones you've encountered before, so we were cautious about the battle. However, thanks to a streak of lucky rolls and several nat 20s, we were able to overwhelm the guy pretty easily. Harry was silent for a moment, and then another guy spawned out of nowhere, took the DMPC hostage without rolls. We asked him why, out of character, and he just responded, I didn't think you would beat him. You were supposed to get captured. So basically, we were forced into submission, or else the DMPC would be killed. We were all raised as siblings, so our characters didn't want to take any risk. Our characters were taken to prison-like camp, and we couldn't do anything to get out. But suddenly, people from an ally faction launched into an attack on the camp. We were able to be freed. However, this is where Sean's character flaw came into play. His character was too bold and confrontational, and instead of fleeing like the rest of us, challenged the leader of the camp to a one-on-one duel. This would have been a quick defeat. Instead, his rolls somehow ended up being a nat 20 and a nat 1 in the leader's favor. Sean's character was completely disfigured and on the brink of death. But as I said, Harry hated to kill characters, so he had the allied faction take him to their base and set to their healer to be cured. However, she was so badly injured that there was only one option, imbuing her with the Kitsune spirit, which turned her character into a furry, without Sean's consent. We all asked Harry, both in and out of character, if there was no other solutions, and the NPCs said that there was nothing else they could have done, and Harry simply replied, I wanted to make her a furry. Sean barely played after that because it was the complete opposite of what the characters grow to be, and the party soon followed suit. As a final note, we were a friend group for 7 years now and still going strong. Despite the story, we still enjoy creating our stories together. So, yeah, the dude got turned into a furry against his will. That's a shitty thing for a DM to do.
I mean, it is, but like, it is. Put on the
I mean, it is funny.
on the spectrum of shitty things for a DM to do. I'm gonna put that at like a 3.
That's
like
true.
like
I
it
mean,
sucks, and you shouldn't do any shit like that ever without insulting the player first, or make it known that maybe they can undo it.
yeah.
I think in those two situations it's fine, but yeah, no. If I had a DM that just turned my character into a furry and he was like, "That's it, you're just a furry now," yeah, no, that would be the end of that character.
Yeah. I mean, it would be anything, but also there's a bit of the stigma with a furry. It's like, yeah, like you want me to be a furry for reasons, and that's
Yeah,
strange.
yeah. When it's somebody else doing it, like I played a Tabaxi before, and it was a lot of fun. I cosplayed it for our Halloween session,
Oh, yeah,
but
sure.
that I made that.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Because the question is, why do you want me to be a furry, though?
Yeah, yeah, it's weird. And I mean, whatever. It's not something I personally want to do, but like I never crossplay like genders or anything, but specifically that it was a female character that he turned into a furry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just makes it a little.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
like
know. That's
it's like
weird,
you just
bro.
wanted to think of fan art with a fox girl. That's what was
Yeah,
going on there.
yeah, yeah. Have you ever played with anybody that had like a weird fetish with a certain race or a furry thing or anything like that? That like they always made it in there.
Not that I can think of. No.
Man, my back in college, my group had a guy that was into lizards, like lizard folk, whatever he could play. If the game had if he was playing a Final Fantasy game and there was a lizard race, that was his favorite character. But every character he made was a lizard, and it was just weird. Like he was weird, and then Dragonborns wasn't a thing yet, thank God.
Yeah.
It was creepy.
So not that I want to shame anyone at all, but if you had to say that one was weirder than the other, which would be weirder, furry or scalies?
I don't know, man. That's really hard. And probably scalies.
Yeah, because
Probably.
because at least like furry can be cuddly, you know,
Yeah.
like yeah, like a big cuddle pal. You hear a lot about those, and it's like, oh, that doesn't sound that bad.
And they're mammalian.
Yeah, yeah. Snakes with boobs is weird, man. Like
Yeah.
Argonians,
It,
like
it could just be my irrational and incredible fear of snakes that guides this decision.
that's fair.
I mean, I guess dragons are not if they're not like dragonborn though. Like dragons are okay when they're like World of Warcraft dragons in their anthropomorphic forms, where they'll have like some certain dragon features, but mostly they're humanoid or
Hmm.
like Chromie's a big one. That's a gnome. Alex Straza, you've definitely seen the cosplay of that. That's just a redheaded tiefling looking chick with horns.
Yeah, I've
Um,
definitely seen that.
yeah, those are different. Those are because they're not like, but no, like the Yuan-Ti, like
Yeah, especially because they don't have legs.
yeah,
It's there's just so much about it that just
yeah. I'm
there's a
not
lot of
about that.
questions.
I'm not about that.
And it's questions that I don't want to ask, but would be forced to ask.
I don't want the answers.
Yeah, like I literally don't want to ask these questions, but and this girl for a little while. She had this snake, and I was sleeping over one night, and I just heard this thing. It woke me up taking the loudest shit that I had ever heard. It was absolutely disgusting. The thing, it was as big as the snake itself. It was ridiculous.
I have no idea what a snake sounds like shitting.
I mean, there's plenty of videos online, man.
I'm good.
It's horrible.
I'm good. I don't need to answer that question.
But yeah, and that's the sort of thing. Like if people were just walking around like snake people, it's like, man, like y'all not wearing pants.
I don't even. You know what? We're not going to get this. I don't. That's not what this is about. I'm not going to go into that. We're not going to get into the anatomy of a snake. I don't need to know. I don't want to know. I don't care. I
All
watched
right.
a video about how anacondas breed one time, and it scarred me. So
So next episode is not about how Yanti would wear pants.
I mean, that's a little different, but still, I get they would wear like one legging, right? Like or like half a legging, I think.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, how would they protect the pant from the ground? Because they move with the slithering motion. So they would just be grinding that fabric into the
No, that
ground. So it's
they
like,
they would have to start doing like a worm, like an inchworm. So I guess that would still slide across, but it would be less so. I think they just don't get to wear pants,
yeah,
or they have to go through. It has to be like leather, and they have to go through a lot of them.
man, that just makes being a snake person expensive. You know what? I would hate humans too.
Maybe that's why they have to molt all the time.
Yeah, I think that's just a part of snakes getting bigger. Anyway, on to the next one. This one is entitled How 250 Pounds of Corrosive Ooze Was Almost the Final Nail in a Coffin of a 3-Year Friendship. It's always fun when playing a game ends friendships. So this one, once again, it's a Pathfinder story. My first time playing D&D, well, technically Pathfinder, was in college. My roommate knew someone that ran tabletop games at a club at a university, and we got a few people together to make a party. Of our group of 5 players, 4 of us were playing tabletop games for the first time. So our characters varied wildly in character personalities and alignments. Our PCs were chaotic evil, in name only, really, true neutral, chaotic good, and neutral good, and lawful evil. We didn't have a group meeting where we talked about general goals or alignments. We all just briefly talked about general roles and then made our characters based on what we wanted to play and were thrown together in a tavern. I made a chaotic good halfling rogue, and my roommate made a lawful evil dragonkin that was some sort of martial class. I was basically used as the skill monkey as we were all min maxed pretty heavily, and I didn't mind being the skill monkey, but that meant that my character ended up doing a lot of the metaphorical heavy lifting in the game. I felt that my character getting to do so much was breeding some sort of animosity with my roommate, but also that it was more due to our literal polar opposite alignments. I primarily got this impression because the roommate would make in character short jokes about my character literally every chance they got, including when I was telling the party my initial backstory about my character's parents dying, spurred my character's want to help others. In the final session, my roommate had to appear online because he went home for summer term. Our group climbed a mountain, explored some caves, and inside one of them we fought a corrosive ooze. After killing it, the GM let our chaotic evil player put 250 pounds of the ooze in their bag of holding. We continued exploring and found the weird pit was a 40-foot deep, sheer rock sides all the way down, and a door at the bottom. We failed a bunch of checks on the door and then left. A bit further along, we ran into a wizard NPC that charmed my roommate so that he would lead the wizard back to the pit. Apparently, the wizard had some sort of dragon cultist or something. We never really got the full story on the wizard. He immediately opened the door, revealing a giant dragon eye. It was then revealed that the whole mountain range was an entombed dragon that the wizard was releasing. I tried to kill the wizard, and when we found out what was happening, but after I landed the attack and rolled pretty high damage, the GM let me know that the wizard wasn't even close to bloodied, and the cave was starting to collapse. The rest of the group just climbed out of the pit after my attack, but my roommate decided his character would want to pledge their loyalty to the mountain dragon. He then decided to attack me as I'd attacked the wizard. I managed to beat him to the rope ladder we'd all used to climb down the pit, and he was wearing the heaviest armor the GM would let us start with, so they were wicked slow climbing up the rope and were only about halfway up. The rest of the group was sprinting out of the cave. However, our chaotic evil player got a wicked grin and had their character return to the edge of the pit by the rope was. He then announced that their action would be to empty their entire bag of holding into the pit. including the 250 pounds of corrosive ooze that dropped out, knocking them back to the bottom of the pit and disintegrating the rope. He immediately disconnected, didn't talk to any of us for at least a week. The GM talked to him privately, and things eventually returned to normal, but ever since then, any campaign I played was run by the GM, started a lengthy discussion between GM and the individual players as a group about what their goals were going to be through the campaign. Um, I have had issues with that in the past where somebody else was. We usually call that alignment chaotic douchebag, where their sort of goal is not to be in a role playing collaborative experience, but they just like to troll the table. And the worst kind of troll is one that's within range of punching that you can't punch.
Yeah, I've had that. In my experience with it, it's usually people that don't really want to play. Like they don't care about the game. They
Hmm.
just don't want to be excluded. Like a group of friends is talking about playing D&D and one of them's not really into it, but feels left out because everybody else is playing it.
Yeah.
So they just want to like fuck up everybody's good time. I mean, it's some childish shit. It's like I'm taking my ball and going home level shit. But
Yeah, I lived with a friend a couple years ago, and it was actually his idea to start the campaign. So we had a friend who would come over and run it, but then my roommate and one other guy would just like every now and then be like, "Ah, we're just gonna do something else tonight," like the day of the game, and so it's like the three of us would be in our house playing the game. My roommate's just he's there, but he's just not playing the D&D game. He's just hanging around. He's like it's like, why did you start the game if you weren't going to be interested in actually going and playing it?
I mean, yeah, I get sometimes like sometimes you're just not feeling it.
Well, this was more often than not, though. Like
Yeah,
it wasn't like every couple of weeks or anything. It was like the campaign died pretty shortly after this because he just more often than not
yeah.
wasn't there.
Had he played before?
Yeah, he did. He played pretty regular games back in the day, but he just decided that he didn't want to be, you know, it wasn't something he wanted to commit himself to.
Yeah. Some people just are good to play with. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
that's what it is.
and like I just wish like in situations like that would like if you're not really gonna be into the game, like just don't play. Like just don't play. Like
Yeah.
do what your roommate did. Just don't play.
Hmm.
I mean, that's better than affecting everyone else's game if you don't want to. I mean, I don't know. Don't
Yeah.
fuck up the game for everybody else.
Hmm.
As far as we got a little off topic though. Back to this, like that's one of those things that has to be like you gotta talk about that outside of the table and establish what everyone's boundaries are. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, and depending on the game, I probably wouldn't have that big of a problem with it, but some games and depending on which character is doing the action and your personal relations with them and everything, it can come out a lot different. And
Hmm.
some people who are super nice in real life are just dicks when they play.
Yeah, it all depends on how, because, a lot of D&D is a power fantasy. So
Yeah.
it's how they react to having that power.
So I made a couple of notes while you were reading about things I wanted to point out in this instead of interrupting, because if I interrupt every time, it'll just drag it out.
Yeah.
Note number one, I'm not this is a blanket statement, but just because it's easier that way, it's not true. I know that not everyone is actually like this, but it's like vegans and bicyclists and gym bros. Pathfinder people are fucking insufferable.
You're right.
Also, Shadowrun or Vampire the Masquerade will be like, "Oh, you play D&D?" Oh, no, I play Pathfinder. It's a superior system. Get leave. Just go away. Just go far away from me, you fucking nerd. Like
Yeah.
you gotta be. You're. It's a nerdy thing that. Okay, it's more mainstream now, but like back in the day, when like the '90s and early 2000s, when it wasn't really that popular, like it was a small enough community to begin with. You don't need to segment yourself. Like we're all in this together, mother.
Yeah.
I just.
It's like I like to apply the Quentin Tarantino head analogy for collecting things, like collecting DVDs is like smoking weed, collecting VHSs is like like smoking crack is like I collect 35 millimeter prints. That's like smoking heroin. Like that's like the worst you can do. It's like so for like for D&D, it's like D&D is smoking weed, Pathfinder's like maybe crack, and then it's like you go to Masquerade and it's like okay, this is heroin. This is like the depths of the nerdery.
Yeah, like I mean, to be honest, if there was if I hadn't already invested so much in it, and there was a comparable system to D&D Beyond with Pathfinder, I would definitely be encouraging people to make the switch because I do like the system better. But if I was playing Pathfinder and somebody was like, "Oh, you play D&D?" I'd be like, "Yeah." Like somebody from the outside, I'd be like, "Yeah, it's D&D," because at this point, D&D is like Kleenex. Like
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's just such a ubiquitous name for tabletop RPGs that yeah, I'm playing D&D.
hmm Thought, where did it go, motherfucker? Yeah, there's Pathfinder Nexus.
Yeah, I looked into it. I don't know if it's quite as good. Like I don't know. I mean, I'm not looking into it some more. I imagine they're probably updating it. But you had
hmm
sent it to me a while back, and it looked a little
Yeah, I never
hinky.
actually went and looked into it, but
But also, there's the other thing in which it wouldn't be that big a deal in the long term. But I have invested so much on D&D, to be honest.
yeah, and like I
Like,
was like actually like more and more playing D&D Beyond. It's like I liked all of the built-in features of Fantasy Grounds, but it got you don't really like now that I'm playing running the game for Strahd, I'm like no, I definitely didn't need any of that. This is sufficient.
yeah, it is what it is. Note number two: alignments. I understand why they were put in, and at this point they're a staple and blah blah blah. But I kind of wish they never were showing up, never showed up. Like they just lead to too many people. Like either it doesn't matter, which is most of the time, or you get that guy's like, well, my character's lawful good. I can't abide by this. Like it just leads to people making douchebags.
Yeah, I think the only time that I think it matters is if you are playing a class that's directly tied to a god of a specific alignment, but you're easily able to get rid of that by saying that it's based on the values of the god, and that's up to the DM's discretion.
Yeah, kind of like what they did with paladins in fifth edition. Like I hated that paladins had to be lawful good
hmm
before. Like that was stupid. Like because you could absolutely be a paladin of Bane. Like Bane would have paladins. Like
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, they had I think they called it a blackguard. It was like a supplement. It wasn't even meant to be a playable race. It was put in there for like the DM to make an evil paladin
hmm
as like who you would fight against. But like I mean, it functioned as a playable, not a playable race, a playable class just fine. But it wasn't really like it said in the DM's guide. It wasn't really intended that way. But I just like that. Paladins can just be whatever. Monks having to be lawful makes a little more sense thematically, but also, yeah, I'm glad they got rid of that too. Or did they get rid of that? Do monks? I don't think monks still have to be lawful, do they?
Yeah, I don't remember there being any like real alignment restrictions on class that I've seen in 5e, though I
Yeah,
haven't built a monk.
yeah. I haven't either. I don't think they still have to be. But like that made a little more sense, but I still didn't like it because I don't like anything that limits the story you can tell with your character.
Yeah, I mean,
And
and
like,
also like the only reason that a monk has to be lawful is because they have to follow a code, right? But that can just be a thing about your character. That doesn't
yeah,
have to be a hard and fast mechanical rule. I mean, that is up to between the player and the discretion, how the player and the DM as to how deep that goes.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, ultimately, that's the one rule that overrides everything else in D&D is does the
hmm
DM allow it? But you have some DMs that don't want to flinch on shit. So
Yeah. Now, also in the game that we're playing, my character is going through a alignment change, as it were. But just because they're being corrupted by the cursed weapon, but we're not like quantifying, and we're not counting karma points like it's Fallout.
yeah, And I mean, I think that's a pretty good way to do it. Is just like you can definitely have a character shift from good to evil, or vice versa. Redemption arcs are always the best, but I don't like that. I don't like it being a hard fast rule, and I'm glad they got rid of it. Point number three, I miss skill monkeys. There's not really much else to say about that. You and me have talked about it. I just miss that skills mattered.
Yeah, I used to love being the skill monkey. It was great because it gave me something to do without having to be the face of the party, and also not having to just in combat just be whack, or cast spells. It let me do something and be unique.
Yeah, I liked it because you could. It gave you a lot of agency as a player to do things and have them have weight. With the way skills are now, like you could be like, oh, I have survival, so that kind of means I can navigate a city or something. Like I'm good with a directional sense, and like yeah, fine. But like if you could be more specific, like you can put points into something more specific, that gives you a lot more weight. Survival is
Mhm.
a bad example.
Performance.
Yeah,
Performance is a great example because there's just performance in 5e, but there was profession, there was performance, I think there was one for acting. There was all sorts of different things that could be lumped under profession, but you could pick one of them and really dial into it. And also with the amount of skill points that you could get in 3.5 for doing this was,
yeah,
it made intelligence matter as
yeah.
well, that skill system. Like
And
intelligence does not matter unless you're a wizard, but why would you be a wizard?
I have that same problem. There's one particular archetype. It's a wizard that focuses on magic missiles, and I played it a little bit in a short campaign, and it was a lot of fun. And I would really like to get into it again. But outside of that, yeah, why would you be a wizard? They are so bad.
And like just the limitation of like, oh, if your spell book gets lost, you lose all of your magic power.
I mean, okay, they have a big spell list, but I mean, how often are you really able to know what spells you're going to need the next day? You know,
Yeah.
like that would be useful if you were in a situation where if you were playing like maybe a military thing where you were scouting out ahead of time, but then when you wait a day after scouting something, it's just and they don't really like all their archetypes don't get like importance obviously awesome, and they the evocation mastery or whatever that one is, I forget what it's called, the one where you can not kill your party with fireball.
Spell shaping.
Sure, is that what
Oh
it's
wait, no,
called?
that's the source. That's the sorcerer's meta magic.
Yeah, no,
Um,
wizards have one that's I think it's evocation master or something, it's something like that. But like that's cool, but meta magic is better. Like
yeah.
just across the board, meta magic is so much better than almost anything the Wizards get. And I'm only saying almost because I'm assuming there's something I'm not thinking about. It may
Hmm.
just be better than it altogether.
Yeah. Though I am enjoying playing a bard lock.
Bards are the bards can just do anything. Like that they're maybe not the best at it, but like that you can build them so many different ways. They're one of my favorite classes that I haven't actually played.
But also
I
like
like them in theory.
the jack of all trades is the closest thing to letting you be a skill monkey as well.
Yep.
Because you what is it, half proficiency in all skills you're not proficient in.
Mm-hmm.
Though I saw somebody say something interesting about multi-classing into the same class. So like you could take two levels of level 1 rogue and get expertise twice. There's something, there was math that would lead to by the time you hit level 3 you can get like a plus 20 d6 on your sneak attack damage.
I don't think you can multi-class in the same class. I don't think that's allowed by the rules.
But is there anything that strictly says you can't though?
I'm pretty sure there is. I mean, I don't know. I haven't like memorized that section of the PHB, but I feel like there definitely is. Because I mean, like, all right, I'm just going to take 4 levels of fighter over and over again. Actually, that wouldn't even be that good because you get them more often or later. I'm gonna take my 5th level of fighter over and over again. Like, I don't think you can do that. Because
I'm gonna look. I'm gonna.
if you could, what would be more interesting is taking multiple subclasses. Like, Like if you could get like rogue assassin and swashbuckler at the same time, like
Hmm.
you would be a beast in one-on-one combat.
Yeah.
Um, or like bear totem and berserker at the same time. Probably some other ones I can't think of right now that would be really good. Definitely, if you could stack paladin subclasses like the vow of enmity and not vow of enmity. What's the that's the ability? What is the paladin? Oath of vengeance and oath of like conquest, or oath of the one that makes you fucking immortal. I don't know, but if you could stack different subclasses like that, that would be strong as shit.
Yeah. Warlock would be cool having like Hexblade and the Pact of the Chain.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it does say that multiclassing is for adding a new class, but it doesn't technically say that that new class can't be the same class.
Go on Twitter, ask Jeremy Crawford. Again, somebody's asked that question before. Like that's out there's no way that's allowed. Like that's out there somewhere, or maybe it is, and I'm just wrong.
Well, now that that TikTok's out there, it's probably being debated,
Yeah,
just like it is right now.
yeah. You could do an artificer. You could get a gun and your battle armor. You could just be a fucking Fallout
Hang on,
Brotherhood of Steel guy. Power armor. That's it. You just
this
have
thing
power
here
armor.
says the number of subclasses a character can have in a single class is limited to 2.
That requires more investigation at a later date.
Yeah, for sure. That's there are now questions to be asked. Tune in
Anyways,
for a future episode.
yeah.
Dun dun
That'll be
dun.
the topic for next week. Did you know? Last point. So like the wizard showing up at the end of that like they tried to attack and the DM was like basically, yeah, he's immortal. I have no problem necessarily with like that happening, but it needs to have a reason. Like the
Hmm.
way it seems to come across in this annoys me because it's just they were going away. The DM didn't want them to go, and so they was like, "Here, let me throw in this guy." And that's just a bad way to do that. Also, doors are the biggest enemy of D&D. That should have been handled differently. Like you can have immortal. We used to play with this guy, and like he loved it. He would do it in almost every campaign he'd run. Coincidentally, his campaigns only ran like 2 sessions usually. First session, maybe second, like we'd be level 2, and he would throw. He wouldn't even give the guy stats actually, but he would throw in a god basically that we had to encounter at some point, and he would always be just an enormous dick.
Hmm.
So inevitably somebody would try to attack him, and then he'd be like, "No." He freezes you all in place.
Yeah.
He gets on his horse and runs away. His horse moves at 500 movement speed. There was one time he did that, like that exactly, and we got him to put a number on it. Like, and I forget what all. Somebody summoned or turned into a griffin and some other shit, and we caught the guy, and he did not know what to do.
Yeah.
Like, as he was like, either I kill everyone or I let my dude, you know, or I mean, he could have just teleported away. I don't remember how he actually ended up resolving it, but like he hated that we managed to within the rules catch him, and it's like he would always do that, and it was so.
Yeah, I've been played in several games where a DM has had tried to just be like, oh, they run away, and there's been a player at the table who's like, aha, they can't because I can run 150 feet every 3 seconds.
It's a handy little trick to have. I'm just saying,
Mm.
it's very very useful. But yeah,
All
that's all
right,
the notes I have on it.
cool. All right. Well, moving on to the next one. This one is an interesting one called "The Genius Who Couldn't Smell Their Own Stench: A Tale of D&D Horror." Now, this one, it's not so much the story itself, but it's the way that it's written. So I'm just gonna fucking go into it, and you just enjoy yourself.
Go
Hel-
nuts.
Hello, fellow adventurers. Gather round for a tale that'll make you gag and cringe in equal measure. Picture this: a gaming session filled with excitement, suspense, and the stench of unwashed ignorance. Strap in because you're about to embark on a journey with a character straight out of a nightmare. Our party welcomed a new member with open arms, or at least we tried to. Let's call him Grim, because his hygiene was as mythical as his intelligence. From the moment he entered the room, the air grew thick with a pungent odor that could only be described as a blend of rotten eggs and damp socks. We all exchanged wary glances, but being the polite adventurers we are, we soldiered on. Grimm's character? A wizard, of course, because nothing says I'm compensating for something like a smelly spellcaster. He strutted around the table like a peacock, boasting about his supposedly superior intellect while spewing nonsense that would make a kobold cringe. Every strategy we suggested was met with a condescending snort and a dismissive wave of his grubby hand. But here's the kicker. Despite his claims of genius, Grimm couldn't solve a riddle if it was written on the back of a beholder. He stumbled through puzzles like a goblin in a maze, all the while reeking like a troll's armpit. And don't even get me started on his combat tactics, charging headfirst into a battle without a plan, and then blaming the rest of us when things inevitably went to shit. Did I mention his charming personality? Grimm had a knack for alienating everyone at the table with his snide remarks and outdated views. He'd make a bard blush with his repertoire of offensive jokes and bigoted comments, all delivered with a smoke that would make you want to introduce his face to a bag of holding. They missed a huge opportunity there. Instead of bag of holding, it should have said chair of folding.
Yes.
In the end, we had to cast a In the end, we had to cast a prestidigitation spell just to get rid of the stink lingering stench. God fucking damn it! In the end, we had to cast a prestidigitation spell just to get rid of the stench lingering in our gaming space. As for Grimm, let's just say he found himself on the receiving end of a banishment spell courtesy of our DM. So, fellow adventurers, heed my warning. Beware the smelly know-it-all who pollutes both the air and the atmosphere of your gaming sessions. And if you ever encounter a Grimm in your travels, may your dice roll high and your patience never falter. Stay fresh, my friends.
And that's the most quintessential D&D experience.
Yeah,
Like, so
and
here, go
I
ahead.
delight the flair with which it was written. Absolutely delights me.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. So here's my only. It's not a problem with this story. It's a concern more so. Like that's such a stereotypical thing. I've never encountered someone like that,
I
which
have.
is like that thing. I was like, if one in three people are such and such, and that person's not, and that person, like, am I that guy?
Yeah.
Like, am I the one that everyone's writing about?
hmm
I don't think I'm that
It's like
guy.
the thing. It's like everybody has an idiot in their family. If you don't, it's you.
Yeah, that's a better example of what I was trying to say. Yeah, like I don't think I'm that guy. And the stench thing though. So I don't know what your local game store is like. I imagine they got a bunch of them up where you live, but there's
Not
one.
really.
Really? That surprised
Yeah.
me. There's one around here pretty much. There used to be two, but the area couldn't support them both. Man, and it's just the sweatiest nerd type of place. Like, but you walk in and it smells exactly how you think it would smell. And I'm like, guys, light a fucking candle. Like, come on, man. Like, I don't like coming in here because I don't want to see people to see me in here. Like,
Yeah. It's like you walk in, you're like, come on, guys, don't be stereotypes.
yeah, and like,
Like I know this is an accepting place. We love you all. But we also love soap.
and man, like, you go in there with a girl, like, I've never taken a girlfriend into the gaming store because I just haven't. No real reason of that. But anyways, a couple of times, like, my friends have gone in there, and one of them would have their girlfriend tagging along, and they just turn and stare, like, a female is here. And I'm
hmm
like, guys, come on, you're making us all look bad.
Yeah. I actually took my ex fiance to a games workshop once, and she actually ended up getting more into Warhammer than I did. And then she just fucked a bunch of them. Yeah.
I guess you had a type, man.
Yeah.
That sucks. That's rough, buddy.
Yeah. And as always, we end with a fat guy pro tip. Remember, Montreal steak seasoning. It's not just for steak. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your life. Bye.